You may have heard people talking about the cycle of abuse. This can come in many different forms, whether it's from the parents or other peripheral family members down to their children. It can come from your relationships with people. It's quite a well-versed and heavily discussed topic on social media. And then another heavily discussed topic is patriarchy or toxic masculinity, or how it's all men, right? So why aren't we having the conversation together? I tend to be of the ilk that broken people do broken things. And unfortunately, it could be that the reason why these men are doing these awful things is because awful things are being done to them. Now, whether awful things are being done to them by other men is one thing. But if you just look at what people are saying about their toxic parents or going non-contact, if you look at people who are making jokes on the internet about their parents, you see who they're joking about more often. The amount of times I've seen videos of women joking about being violent to their children is unreal. And don't deny that you haven't seen it, because I know that you have. I know that you have, with mothers walking around like taking their shoes off and throwing them at their children, or, you know, the belts, or that kind of thing. There's a whole sound on this app with "not today" from a woman, and it's all laughed at and praised, and everyone thinks it's hilarious. But a comedian goes on a stage and he makes a joke about domestic violence, and that's not okay. Why do we keep looking at society with two different lenses instead of just looking at each other as human? I don't understand. I don't understand why some of society wants to hold up themselves as being the greater victim, or the one that's in most need of protection, when cycles of abuse happen because children are harmed. Interpol and ECPAT International into the online sexual exploitation of children suggests that when online images or videos of child abuse depict boys or very young children, the abuse is more likely to be severe. So there's that. And this comes from my pinned post for International Men's Day. It's my first pin, so don't ask me for my sources, it's already there. We as a society tend to focus on empowering girls. Achieving gender equality also requires attention for boys. They too need to know they are not circumscribed by ideas about who and how they should be. Just let that sink in for a minute. Boys are more likely than girls to die in their second decade of life, and they use more alcohol and tobacco habits that erode their health as they age. But even more troubling, the team found that boys suffered higher levels of physical violence, neglect, and abuse by adults than girls. And the more a boy was victimized, the more likely he was to do violence to others. Are we still out here trying to say that there isn't a cycle of abuse? And are we still out here trying to say that it's just all men? Really? And if you know me and you know my content, you would know that the bottom paragraph perfectly explains how I feel about the topic. These findings should serve as a gut punch. We can't solve the problem of violence against girls and women without also addressing violence against men and boys. And we won't succeed in teaching our sons to care for other people's bodies until we learn to take care of theirs. You may hate the message, but it's one that you need to receive. It is not enough to put this solely on the shoulders of men. We have to look at women too. Women are victims in their own right, but they are also perpetrators of violence in their own right too. Don't believe me? I've also done videos about that as well, and given sources on that as well. And so I get very emotional and tired when I keep seeing the repeated nonsense of men do this and men do that. Well, where did that man come from? Who were his parents? Well, his dad wasn't around. Oh, really? So he was raised by a mother then? Just a mum on her own? Would that have something to do with it? Because if a dad wasn't around to teach that son how to be a proper man, isn't that part of the problem? Or could it be that society views women as more valuable than men, and so boys pick up on this from a very young age, for example, and they know that they're not as valuable as girls? And if you don't believe me, tell me why images like this exist. Tell me why news articles like this exist. Tell me. And can someone tell me why we're trying to teach about toxic masculinity when it's that same masculinity where a woman is being harmed and you need that masculinity from another man to jump in to protect her from the man that is doing it? Because the man that is committing a crime against a woman, let's just say he's the one that has the toxic masculinity, right? He doesn't give a shit about you being on social media talking about toxic masculinity. He doesn't give a shit about any kind of DV lessons you might want to give him. They don't care. But instead what you're doing is, by saying this and making young boys think that they're monsters and teaching that all boys are the problem because it's all men, what you're actually doing is teaching those boys to not come to your defense. You're teaching those boys that every time they approach you that they're a creep. You're teaching those boys that when harm happens to you, they don't have to intervene, which is hilarious because, when things are happening to women and men aren't intervening, now you've got an issue with it. But you taught them that their masculinity was toxic. So what do you want to do? And then you get individuals who are triggered by the likes of Tate or Fresh and Fit or those, red pillars, that are completely on the outlier end of things. You wonder where they come from. Well, it's a natural antithesis to the bullshit that you're putting out there. Because when you start vilifying half of society, and indeed the children, people get fed up with that shit. People get fed up with that shit real fucking quick. And then you get people with extreme views, opposing extreme views, speaking up. And because you've pushed people so far with your shit ideology, you wonder why they get listened to. Well, because you pushed it too far. Because you've gone past the point of being equal, and you've gone past the point of caring about everyone into actually just self-victimizing yourself and infantilizing yourself in the hope of being superior to other people. Nah, draw the line. But then we get extremes too in gamma bias, right? Gamma bias is basically when we appreciate one and vilify the other. For example, people appreciated this post. They even celebrated it. And yet if a man were to write this on the internet, absolutely vilified. And I'll tell you why I say what I say and why I do what I do. It's not because I think that all men are innocent. Absolutely not. Because, I've been a victim at their hands myself. But moreover, I've been a victim at the hands of women. So I can kind of see both sides of the coin here, and that broken people come in both genders, and that this conversation is a lot larger than just saying all men. But I tell you who is innocent right now. That guy. Yeah, that little chap is my son. And I also have a stepson, and I also have a husband and a brother and a father and a lot of men in my life that I care about who are innocent. And it is absolutely offensive to say it's all men until it's no men, because until we start saying, for example, it's all mothers who fuck up their children, until it's no mothers. Bring that energy to the table and then maybe we'll talk about it. But you'll say, no one's talking about this. No one's saying this. Oh, but you are. You are.
All men. It's all men.
It's all men.
All men.
It is all men.
It's all men.
All men. It's all men.
All men.
All men.
It is all men.
It's all men.
It is all men.
It really is all men.
All men are trash.
It's all men until it's...
It's all men until it's no men. Okay. It's all mothers until it's no mothers. No one is born a monster. They're made.